Welcome everyone, here is my step-by-step no-nonsense tutorial on how to remove the side fairings from your S1000XR. For me, I was installing a new set of headers and a slip-on. Start with 3 T25 bolts for the heat shield. That's going to expose two 13mm clamp bolts or nuts. Make sure they're both backed off and the clamps are loose. Head back to the passenger peg. There's a T45 there, and that's going to release the entire muffler section. You give it a few wiggles, carefully pull it off. Moving forward slightly, we're going to go to a T25 for the exhaust valve cover. Just remove that. The cover's plastic. It will snap off of there. That's going to reveal the adjuster nuts. They are 10mm, so back those off. I started with the rear one because it was more accessible. Walk that cable around the pulley, release the end. That gives you a little bit more room to get the forward one. Walk that around, release the end. We'll come back to removing the electronics portion of that a little bit later. In the center of the bike, you have a T45 on each side. I chose to remove the right one and leave the left one for when I'm actually ready to drop the headers. Chin fairing is T25s. They usually stay captive, so they don't go flying everywhere, so it's nice. And then each front corner is a push rivet. Push the center through, extract the rivet, being careful not to lose that part that you just pushed through. And then unclip the two hoses from the bottom, and you can remove the chin fairing. While here, I gave the O2 sensors a squirt of liquid wrench, just in case. The side fairings come off with a single T25 up by the steering damper on both sides. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel like you're braking your bike. Just go with it. Pull them straight off, and they will unsnap. So that's the outer side fairing. Do that on both sides. Radiator shrouds are held with T25 bolts. I would start keeping track of all these T25s. There are dozens of them, and they all have different lengths and different shoulder distances. Remove the seat. That is revealing another T25 in the very center. That is what's holding the seat pad. So undo the clips by pulling straight back. That reveals an additional fastener that you couldn't see before on the inner side fairing. In my case, they are black pieces. Work your way up front. There is one at the rear. Now there's a little interference with the tail fairing, so you can either take the tail fairing or tail cowling off, or just take 2 bolts and loosen the third, just enough to swing it out of the way, just to eliminate that interference fit. Same process here, a firm pull. Work your way up around. Not shown is undoing the turn signal connector. A 17mm wrench will get the O2 sensors out. Let them hang between the stock exhaust. T25 will release the oil cooler from the radiator. The bottom of the oil cooler is a C-clip. That lets you get a little more room to get your finger in there and get the bottom of the radiator C-clip, then the top left and top right C-clip. So there's 4 C-clips total. Once that's done, the radiator is loose enough to pull forward a couple inches. The bottom of the radiator and oil cooler have a mount. T30 for that, T30 also for the coolant bottle. This gives you a little bit extra room for your hands. I chose to zip tie it up to a wire loom just to keep that upright and out of the way. To remove the header nuts, use a 10mm 12-point extension. Put up the center stand because the exhaust won't drop off, so you're going to have a paddock stand or raise the rear somehow. These are not tight, so a few turns with the wrench and then the rest will come off by hand. This is the second T45 under the center of the bike. That's going to release the exhaust. Watch that oil line as you pull everything off. Now we're going to take off the exhaust servo motor for the valve. So 2 T25s. There is an electrical connector. You're going to have to reach in there with a screwdriver to undo. And then fish out the whole assembly with cables. Open the assembly with T25 Torx. And that's going to let you undo the cables from the pulley. Now, to get the cables completely out, you're just going to take a flat blade, pop up, and they will come straight out the back. We're going to reassemble the servo motor housing and then reinstall on the bike. That way there's no error codes. It's going to do its thing. It's just not going to be connected to anything. You don't need a servo buddy or anything like that. For the exhaust, Akrapovic says start with the flanges mounted finger tight first with springs hanging off of them. Finger tight. You'll torque those later once everything is finally done. Now you can experiment with one pipe at a time. I determined it was easier to put the two center ones in first because they do have a crossover tube. Just make sure they fully seat in the flanges. Pull the springs either with a spring puller or a zip tie. If you're using a zip tie, I warn you, use one that is thick enough. I ended up using a spring puller I made years ago with a piece of music wire. Almost done. You're just going to take the collectors, then mount the O2 sensors back up. They are in a slightly further rearward position, but there's still plenty of wire to reach. If you use sealant squished out, make sure you wipe that off. Clean the entire exhaust. It's a good idea to test everything before you put the fairings back on. If all goes well, you'll have something like this. It'll sound great. Give it a test ride. Show your friends. Stay tuned for my next video on how I flash the ECU with a tune to take advantage of the freer flowing exhaust. Thanks for watching.